Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do an unboxing of Hill of Doves, the First Anglo-Boer War, a newly released wargame from Legion Wargames designed by Godfrey Bailey. Now, for those of you out there who may have fallen asleep during that one day in history class when they covered the First Anglo-Boer War, I thought we would offer some historical backdrop to the conflict in the game before we jumped in and looked at what's inside. Now, this is a conflict that happened again in late 1880 to early 1881. And as an aside, I was looking on Board Game Geek last night to see how many games have been made on this conflict. I think this might be the first war game that focuses exclusively on this conflict. So this might be a piece of history in our hands. There are some games that concentrate on the Second Anglo-Boer War, which is the First War, this bigger brother, if you would, that lasted much longer, a couple of decades later, but nothing that focuses exclusively on this. Now, this conflict lasted about 10 weeks. It was between the British Empire and the Transvaal Republic, fought in what is now modern-day South Africa. And the backdrop behind this was the British Empire was trying to expand into South Africa and had annexed the Transvaal Republic. The reasons they wanted to be in the region were largely because it was a key point on the trade route to India. They didn't want other nations to get it. And diamonds had been found in the area as well. So a lot of British Empire interest in the region. They annexed the Transvaal Republic, but then over a number of years after that annexation, the relations between the two entities went sour. And it led to the Transvaal Republic rebelling in late 1880. Now, the war was very short. There was only 3 major engagements fought between the British and the Republic. And the Boers absolutely routed the British forces. Now, these were engagements that were the troops numbered in the hundreds. This isn't a massive forces or armies clashing against each other. There's a relatively small number of engagements consisting of forces, again, that were in the hundreds or so. So part of the reason why the English forces got routed was attributed to their absolutely horrendous leadership. And in this game, which is a solitaire war game, you play the role, or we play the role, of the leader of the English forces. And our goal is to rewrite history and defeat the Boer Republic, or the Transvaal Republic, in this conflict. So with that being said, let's jump in, open up the box, take a look at what's inside, and offer some initial impressions on the gameplay. As we start out on this unboxing, I do want to mention, full disclosure, this is a review copy of the game provided to us from Legion Wargames. Let's get started and talk a little bit about the artwork. I love this design and illustration on the cover. And I think, as a general statement, the execution of the components and the artistic vision behind this is just top-notch. It feels just like a great job done in terms of the overall artistic quality and execution of the game in that regards. Let's talk a little bit about the game meter down here, which kind of is a good way to get kind of a general overview of the game. Number of players, of course, is 1. Solitaire suitability is high. There is no 2-player mode, so you're only playing as the British Empire, and you can't take the side of the Boer forces either. It's just the English forces that you can control in this game, so it's always from their perspective. Now, the game complexity is listed as a medium, and that to me feels about right. There's quite a bit going on. There's a number of mechanics, a lot of stuff going on, and as we can see up here, there's 3 11x17 mounted maps in the game. 1 for the strategic level, 1 for the operational level, and 1 here, and this one on the right is the tactical map. And so these, the play between these maps are kind of, there's some integration that you have to kind of figure out with that. Weather events, supply, ammunitions, medical supplies, a lot of different stuff that you're kind of monitoring as you play this game. So there's quite a bit of depth, components, mechanics that we're working with. Nothing that feels incredibly complicated, but it just, there is quite a bit going on. So a medium feels about right. Now, it doesn't mention how long specifically in terms of a number of hours that it takes to play the game, but up here, the very last paragraph on this top side says, once the rules have been mastered, a game can be concluded in a single evening. So 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, I guess. 3 hours feels about right if you're pretty fluid with the rules, but again, not having played the game yet, I'm kind of speculating in that regard. So let's open this up and take a look inside. Now, here we go. Let's start with the easy stuff. We have a die, and then we have some baggies. And nothing says I love you to a wargamer more than some baggies to put the counters in. Now, we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about the card decks. There's 5 of them. And let's open these up. Now, these, of course, originally came sealed. I've taken a look at them in preparation of this unboxing here. So we have 3 card decks. there's an operational in this pack, operational deck, then we have a tactical deck, and a strategic deck. And I'll put overviews, kind of the covers here. And then this other packet, we have 2 more decks, one of which is the large and hefty event deck right here. So we have a number of cards. I'm not sure the exact number, but it feels 30s, 40s maybe. That's the event deck. And then we have the ambush deck. Now, these 4 decks are what are called sequence of play decks. And if you're familiar with the work of Stuka Joe, the basic idea behind this, and he was involved in the development of these decks and the integration of these decks into this game, and his contention is that a sequence of play player aid that's often provided on one sheet of paper isn't enough basically to help execute a game well. What works better is creating what are called these sequence of play decks, and I'll show some close-ups of the cards here. And basically the idea is that when you're playing the game, if you're in the strategic phase of the game, you're going to start with strategic card number 1, and then it gives you all of the information and instructions and the charts that you need on this particular card to execute it. When you're done with number 1, you go to number 2, 3, 4, and so on until you get to the end. And then here it says advance the strategic time marker and go to operational card 1. So as you play this game, you're constantly weaving between these decks. And if there's a conditional clause that sends you from one deck to another deck, there's going to be a spot in that deck that says, like, if this happens, here we go here. So a night assault segment. If there's a night assault, go to tactical card 5, and you're going to pick up the sequence of play there. So you're playing the game basically by going through these decks of cards in order, and all of the information that you need to execute that particular phase of the game is right on the card. So these 3 are the tactical, strategical, and operational deck, and this is the ambush deck for that. Then we have, and we can take a look at these to provide some variety and spice in the game, we have event deck, and I'll show some close-ups on these. So this provides some kind of randomness to the game and different types of events that can happen to go through. And there's quite a number of these. I mean, we've got a great variety. Each of them have a little image on them, lots of different stuff. So it really, one of the things that I feel with this game, just kind of looking at it, there is a ton of attention to detail, especially when you start to look at these execution decks here, and just the variety of decks and event decks and things that are in here. There's a lot of stuff here. So I feel like with this, it's likely a game that you can kind of spend quite a bit of time with and dig in and really kind of play through multiple times. And again, not having played, I don't know the difficulty, so there is that to consider too. But I feel like this game's going to have quite a bit of replayability and quite a bit of depth. Now, we have here 3 books that come with the game. There is, and we'll take a look at each one in turn. There's the Introductory Book, the Example of Play book, and the Rules book. And they all kind of, I almost feel like this is the Introductory Rules book. This is an Example of Play book, but it's also a part of how I found helpful to kind of learn the basics of the game in initial reading. And then the Rules book is another component to it. But all 3 of these weave together to help you learn the game. Now, the Introductory Book here, let's take a look at it, and I'll show some close-ups on some specific pages. Basically starts, it's going to show you kind of an overview of all the components. And because there's a strategic, operational, and tactical level, certain components are used for certain parts of the game. So this kind of outlines which pieces go where, which parts go where. It shows you what all the counters are, how they're used, where they're used, and things like that, some of the abbreviations. So this is basically kind of orienting you to all of the different components and what they mean and where they go and the symbols and the maps and stuff like that. So here we're looking now at the tactical game components and the pieces. And so this goes on like this. And this one is basically counting the map that has the back that has this map. We've got 16 pages, but we've also got this Horrors of Majuba, which is a poem written in 1888 about the conflict. And then we have some background on the conflict taking up 2 pages. So this introductory rule section here, which again, there's a lot of white space here, a lot of images. It's very visual. It's pretty easy to thumb through this in probably maybe 5-10 minutes and have a sense for what it's trying to give to you. Is basically 11 pages of content, and then you've got the cover. So really 10 pages of stuff here to kind of dig into in terms of learning the game. So let's put that off to the side here, and then let's go into the rules. And I want to keep out the strategic and tactical and operational deck here to show how they're used. Because when I heard that these tactical decks were used, the sequence of play decks were used with the game, I was very excited about it. But my understanding, the way I thought of it was, you learn the game, you learn the rules, you play the game, and then as you play the game, that's when you bring in the card decks here. But they're very much more integrated into the learning of the game than I anticipated. And here's kind of how it works. So the rule book is basically divided up into the strategic phase, the operations phase, the tactical phase, and then the battle phase, which they kind of overlap. I mean, the battle phase happens kind of it jumps back and forth essentially between these. You could come from the operations phase if your forces get ambushed into this battle phase, and you could come from the tactical phase into this battle phase. So this is really the execution of combat, and these phases are kind of the movement and the strategies used behind them. So there's really kind of the three phases and then a way you execute fighting. And so each one of these rule segments here, we can see this is basically segment 1.1, strategic movement segment. These are all the rules that apply to, let's find card number 1, to this strategic movement segment. They're named the same thing, and this has the chart that you need to execute this section of the rules. This provides the in-depth information. The idea is you read this, but then as you're playing the game, you don't need to refer back to this because all the important stuff is right here. Likewise, section 1.2, the reinforcement segment, goes with this card. And so this is all the information you need on that. Segment 3, negotiation segment, here's the card that refers to that. So I found it really helpful as I was reading through the rules to have the appropriate card handy so I can look at this chart and what they're talking about. I feel like these go together. So basically what I'm trying to say is this sequence of card play deck is integrated into the rule book. They go together. You kind of want to look at both of them as you're figuring out how to play. Very elegantly done. A really interesting and novel way I found to kind of consider how games are both played and learned, because in essence you're using the execution tool to learn the game, but this execution tool is pulling all of the relevant information into this card deck that you constantly have reference handy as you're playing the game. So this rulebook, again, we have the strategic, the operational phase level, and they work this. Each one of these refers to cards, and then I haven't quite finished the rules. The game just arrived a few hours ago, but so it kind of doesn't work that way as we get to this battle segment. But the rules still refer to these different components and things like that in the sequence of play. And so it all kind of works together in a way that makes a lot of sense. It's just a little bit different as you get to this back end here. So this covers the battle segments. This is a full segment of rules only, and it's 15 pages with this kind of mention of these other two games as the 16th page. So not counting the front and back cover, we've got 14 rules. It's glossy paper, 8.5 by 11, very clean and crisp. There's a good amount of text here, but a lot of it is really kind of combined with these sequence of play cards. They work together pretty well to explain things. So I didn't find it difficult to really understand any of the rules as far as I've gotten so far. Now, the next part, which I did find helpful, because there's a lot of components here. You've got the strategic map, operations map, the tactical map, and you've got execute battle. There's a lot of things going on, and you're jumping back and forth kind of between these maps quite a bit. Certain things are in certain places. This is the example of playbook, and this basically goes through this, by the way, too, is your setup section. So the first part of it, number 1, is the game setup. So this tells you where to put everything. You're putting stuff on all 3 maps as you start out. So weather maps, tactical maps, time markers, victory points, all these kinds of things, though, the victory condition track, lots of different pieces and everything. So this explains basically the whole setup. And then it goes into the strategic phase. And again, each one of these segments in this example of play corresponds to its appropriate card. So once again, we're looking at this strategic phase, strategic movement segment, strategic movement phase. It goes right here. It refers to this, and that refers there. Then we have the reinforcement segment. So this is giving you an example of how this card is executed. So once again, we can see how the sequence of play cards is integrated into the learning of the game and the execution of the game. Really brilliant, clever. I haven't seen a game that teaches how to play and supports play in quite this way. Now, maybe I think there's been other games done with these sequence of play cards, but this is my first experience with it. Really excited to see how it works in terms of execution. I love it so far. Found it very, very helpful for learning the game. So big thumbs up so far. Now, the final judgment really is, again, how it's going to be when it plays out. And I still don't know that because I have yet, of course, to play the game. But so far, it's been extremely helpful. It's made learning the game very, very painless, very easy, almost really fun to go through because you feel like, okay, I got it. Okay, there's the card. I got all the information I need. Be able to refer to it when I'm playing. I feel very supported in learning the game and executing the game. So this feels really good so far. Really, really like it. Now, this example of play is 20 rules, and it's pretty thorough. It covers, almost all of the phases. We've got the ambush phases in here too, the tactical phase, operations phase, and all the different things that can happen in there too. So real thorough example of play that can support the learning of the game. So there is that component there. This has taken a while, but there's quite a bit, I think, to show here. This is a very unique, I feel like this is a very unique game. And that's one of the reasons I'm really excited. I'm very unexpectedly surprised by this. I didn't have that thorough of an understanding of what the game entailed, but the more I've spent time with it this afternoon, I am really excited to play. This feels fresh. It feels novel. I'm really interested to see how this strategic and operations level and tactical level play out together. And I'll talk a little bit about my understanding of how they weave together in just a moment. But let's take a look at the counters here. So we have one counter sheet. These are 6/10 of an inch across square, printed on both sides, and I'll show some close-ups of them here. There is some step losses that are involved in the units, as we can see by a weakened second side here. Now these tan forces here are the Boer forces, and then the English forces here, and the different leaders are up here. And again, we can see lots of different components and markers that are supporting gameplay as well. So very nicely done. These are beautiful, by the way. I mean, these are top-notch counters, really well executed, just beautiful to look at, and I think very helpful. Just really, really clean, crisp, well-designed counters. We also have some markers here. Let me see if I can pop these out. This, again, two-sided. These are, again, play supplements and kind of players. They go in different places on the different maps to kind of help control and kind of identify what's going on in the game. We can see there's just circular markers for some of the different components and places in the game here, too. So you've got that extra second, how would you say, half set of circular counters. Now, let's take a look at the maps, and I think what I'm going to try, we'll take a look at the maps, and then I'm going to explain my understanding of how they work together so far. There are 4 of them. There's this 8.5 by 11 optional battle board, and I'm kind of right about this section of rules. My understanding is that this is optional. You don't need it to execute the battles, but I think this is a way it can help you organize and control and understand how the battles are executed if you need it, but it's considered optional. You don't have to use it if you feel like you don't need it. This is, again, very simple. We can see different places where you're going to put units. You're pulling them off that tactical map to put them on here, or the operations level map to put them on here to basically kind of help resolve combat. Now, we have here, this is the tactical, and I'll show close-ups of these because I could put them on sideways like this. Mounted maps, these are each 11 by 17, so 2 8.5 11s really put together. This is the tactical map, but let's first go to the strategic level map that's in here, and I'll show a close-up of this too. So this is the strategic level map, and I'll put it sideways here, but I'll show a close-up that's vertical. And basically, what you're trying to do as the English forces, you're kind of starting, if you would, although there's English forces at this Newcastle place, in this Durban, and you're trying to, at a strategic level, you're trying to move your troops and reinforcements up here to Fort Amiel in Newcastle. And what the British were trying to do as the hostilities broke out, we can see these 7 strong points here. These were all isolated and surrounded by the Boer forces. And so the British forces were trying to break the logjam up here near this Fort Amiel to get through to break the sieges on these points. So as you're playing the game, we can see we have a strategic time track here, and we can see these British territory, Transvaal independence. So the victory track is kind of weaving back and forth between this. If one of these cities falls, it's going to add a point, I think, to this victory track, and it makes it less likely. So you're trying to get to these places and break that logjam and get supplies up before these places fall or time runs out. And that's how the Transvaal Republic can win. Now, as we see here, we can see, and I'll put this up on a kind of an overview to show, this Newcastle hex right here, so this is the strategic map, this Newcastle hex right here correlates with Fort Amiel, this hex on the operations level board. Now, each hex on this operations level board is 1 2/3 miles. So we can see here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. A little bit less, less than 20 miles from here to here. Whereas each hex on this strategic level map is 36 miles. So this hex here is represented here. And basically what happens is you're trying to get your forces from here on the strategic level map. Once they get here, they're brought into bear on this map here, the Fort Amiel, this operations level map. Now on this operations level map, you're in turn trying to run ox wagons and supplies and reinforcements up this route here to get them to Mount Prospect, which is the British camp and kind of the launching point of British tactical operations. Now on this map, you can get ambushed by the Boer forces, which creates all kinds, and that would lead to a tactical engagement, which you can resolve on that optional battle board. This is where, so tactical engagements can result out of this. But as a British leader, you're trying to get your troops up this tunnel, basically this Forces Valley, to get up to this British camp. This hex here, in turn, once you get forces and supplies here, they are transferred to tactical map. Yay! And this is as deep as it gets. So this British camp hex here is this same hex here on this map. And on this map here, the hex is, I think, yeah, there's 1,000 yards across. So basically, this is a much smaller scale. And now we see the logjam that the British have to break. So they control this British camp, and they start with this British camp. These are all Boer-controlled strong points and forts that have to, high points that have to be taken in order to break the logjam, and in turn, free up these 7 strong points that have been surrounded and isolated by the Boer forces. Now, there's no combat that occurs here. The one way that the British can outright win the game before you get to the end of the game is by controlling all 10, including the British camp, all 9, well, 1 and then the other 9, all 10 of these strong points, and that wins you the game. And so what you're doing here is you're moving your columns and forces up and trying to capture and take these strong points, and there's a lot of different tactical considerations here. And then when you launch an attack on one of these points, that's where you can either resolve the combat here, or that's where you can shift to that optional battle board if you want to resolve the combat on that. Now we can see also that each one of these maps has different player aids and ways to measure things, and you're kind of, these are your supplies because supplies are expended. There's definitely a logistical component to this game where you're trying to bring supplies, ammunitions, medical aid, supplies up to here to this British camp to kind of fuel the offensive and the combat that's going up on in here. So pretty cool integration between these 3 maps, and I think that's pretty much, I think that covers everything. We're down to the last component. We've seen the maps. We've talked about the sequence of play cards. Normally these unboxings, I feel, go pretty fast, but there is just a lot to this one. Quite a few things going on. I'm very excited to give it a shot. I feel like I spent about an hour and a half with the rules, and I've got a pretty good try. I want to kind of review some of the combat rules and take a look at the setup and stuff like that, but I feel like I'm almost ready to give a first playthrough. I will be bringing some sort of play demo to the channel. I'm not sure. I'd like to play a whole game. I'm not sure how that will work, and then eventually do kind of a final review too. So we'll be back with more videos as we go forward. I am extremely excited to play this. The more I look at it, the more excited I am to play. I do have some questions. I wonder about the difficulty. I have no idea on the difficulty. I wonder about, so the strategic board here feels like things kind of happen, and you're reporting scores a lot. So what happens on this, if the British get routed in one of these battles, this overall political situation here on this map moves 2 boxes towards the Transvaal independence. So basically some of the stuff that happens here is getting reported back and recorded on this strategic level map. The strategic level feels a little bit to me, not having played it, I'm not sure, it feels like it kind of happens. So I wonder how much agency the player has at that level. At the operations level, it feels like you're trying to run supply missions and get your reinforcements up there as safely as you can. And then the tactical level feels to me like where you have the most agency over the game. But again, I'm kind of speculating here, but I'm very excited to give it a shot, really excited to dig in and play. I wasn't expecting this level of elegance, thought, attention to detail. I mean, this just feels like a game that has been extremely well thought out, a lot of care put into the production and the development. And as an aside, I know the development of this game, I think, started 10 years ago. There are pictures of prototypes and kind of versions of the game 9 years ago, back on Board Game Geek. So it has been a long journey, certainly for Godfrey Bailey and Hill of Doves, to finally make it to reality here as a Legion Wargames game. Very excited to give it a shot. So we'll be back with some more videos. If you've got questions and I might be able to help answer them, please feel free to drop them down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. I'm going to pick it up. Excited to give it a try. I'm pretty excited. I'm really looking forward to this one. And thanks as always for tuning in. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new, please consider subscribing. About 40 to 50% of the channel content right now is currently board wargaming, and would love to have you along for the ride. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a great rest of the day.